Hola, hola, hola. Perfecto, ya se me oye. Bueno, id sentado.
If you could please go back to your seats. Members of the round table, please take your seats as well. Two members of the round table are in a traffic jam right now. Sorry about that. They're on their way and they'll join us as soon as they can make it to this building. So bear with me for a second. Let me take a look at the script. I will be the moderator. One basic reason, I'm very picky and I will be throwing trick questions at them. I have an agenda here. I'm not going to stick to the agenda. I'm going to ask questions on the fly.
Por ahí fuera, ¿vale? Entonces, vamos a ver si podemos seguir.
So let's see how it goes. Quick introductions, but please introduce yourselves. Tell us what you do, why you're here, why you think it is important for you to be in this round table. Jorge, apart from being a friend, he's also from northwestern Spain. Yolanda, she's a journalist, but she's very technical. She's got a very interesting book.
En televisión.
Monica, I'm sure you know her. Probably you've seen her on TV. She's embarked on a very interesting project. She will tell us more about it. And then Jose Luis, one of the reasons that we organize these events, that's because I admire the events, similar events that they organize, and they are the backbone of security. So we are waiting for Luis Núñez del Mundo from El Mundo and Carlos Otto from El Confidencial. They will be with us shortly. So would you like to start? Yes, please. Well, most of you know me, and I'm here because in the past I did digital edition. In 2008, I developed a software which is known. It was not the germ of WordPress because WordPress did not start it up until 2003, and I had a very similar editing software in 1998. And well, I've been one of the pioneers in digital edition in Spain, and here I am to discuss freedom of speech. I was also owner of a small daily in my home county. I founded 15 years ago. I sold it, but it's still up and running. So Jorge doesn't say, but he's got a great influence in the media, and actually Yolanda is with us today because Jorge recommended us to invite her. So thank you very much for inviting me. I've been following this event remotely. It is an honor to be here with you. I am a journalist. Part of the work that I carried out in the last few years is being about researching and evangelizing, so to speak. Through my books, I wanted to communicate or to talk about hacktivism, and recently I've also dealt with the darkest side of society, to put up a number of questions to society, and I just want to establish a bridge between these two fields, between these two actors, explain some these, and for instance the position that the media are left. So 2005 was the year when I wrote cyber activism, and last year I wrote Cyber War, which is a book that tries to put on the table the debates related to cybersecurity, impact that has on our rights, and to what extent this is a debate that should not be left on the hands of experts, politicians, legal experts, and cyber activists. So human rights are at stake, so everyone, or we all, should be aware of it. I've also covered some specific phenomena on media, for instance the disclosure of Snowden papers that I discovered for Diario.es. So thank you everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I am a journalist. I've been specializing in technology and IT security. When I started, I loved this sector, this world. I got to know highly interesting people, and it helps me learn every day. I've worked in several media, also on TV, as Roman said, and a few months ago I created my own project, BitLight Media, where we talk about technology, IT security, innovation, and our objective is to tell everything that is happening in the sector and to tell that in a close manner. Because I believe that IT security is still far from users. We still need to transfer, to communicate, to convey that message in a language which is better understood, and we also want to build a culture of cybersecurity. When you ask that why we are here today, we all want to be aware, we have to be aware that we need each other. We experts and professionals in the industry and journalists and those working on the media, because we have to communicate, to convey to users and to citizens the importance of cybersecurity and the importance of being protected, of being secure. So Luis, good afternoon. I would like to thank the host for inviting us. We feel brothers of Rooted ever since it was set up, had the first edition. So in Old Castilian, they used the verb to refer to detachment of or bringing together civil society. We want the civil society to get a better understanding about what happens in terms of security. So I am a journalist, and I am very proud of not being an engineer, for good or for bad. It's very important to have different perspectives and to have a tower from where you can try understand where things are going. We've been doing that through our magazine that was set up or founded 25 years ago, where security was not as it is now. And what we do is that we train and inform corporate world in issues relating to privacy, information security, that has been renamed as cybersecurity. So thank you very much, Luis, for your introduction. The first point on the agenda is what happens with traditional media, print media versus digital media. So we summarize this as following. Traditional media communicate information to lots of people, but only few of them develop those news, whereas in the digital world, everyone can create content. What about this change of paradigm, this change of model? What's the impact of it? So thank you. Good afternoon. Carlos Otto from The Confidential. Would you please, Carlos, introduce yourself and tell us why you are here? Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies, big apologies. I'm very, very sorry. Apologies to you who are sitting here, and but I especially would like to apologize to the other panelists. I am a freelance journalist. I work for elconfidencial.com. I worked for other media in the outlets in the past, such as Tres Media, La Vanguardia, El Mundo. I am breathless. Apologies for that. And I wrote my articles in the sections of technology. I also about online fraud, cyber harassment. So it's not purely techie technology, but technology, applied technology. So we have just introduced the first point, traditional media versus digital media. Traditional media, only few produce content, whereas digital media, lots produce content. Well, I'm going to sell my book. Well, in Reader you have cyber activism, and then a tweet and a PDF of the book. You can download it. So a good part of my book explains that how the internet is displacing traditional elites, and especially the elites that have the monopoly, in this case about the news. Before the internet, traditional media had a strong power, and so that's the topics they wanted to focus on. who was relevant, who was not relevant, what was true and what was not true. So in the internet, there is no intermediation, and then the role of the media outlets as mediators between reality, real life, and the piece of news. That is to say, that the news, a piece of news as we know it today, digital news, is in the power of all of us. We all have power over it. So many traditional media see that as in a highly hostile manner. So all the information that what they show hackers as pirates. So it is not a naive information. They feel displaced by a new reality, a reality which is taking away the monopoly. And then we are also seeing other phenomena. For instance, fake news now. Fake news which is related to the previous presentation. To what extent do we have enough information to determine whether issues that should be of concern of us, such as fake news, have an impact on the public opinion, or it is part of the erosion campaign carried out by an elite that feels displaced and wants to regain its power as the one and foremost relator or communicator. So the organization that I represent went to the parliament a few days ago, and then we started quoting a judgment issued by Clinton administration back in the 90s when they tried to regulate information on the internet. It was the first activism movement where many websites, Yahoo and others, became black to protest, to complain about that law. So the judgment establishes the great and the social power of the internet. Yes, the media have no longer the monopoly, so this causes social tension, some negatives, for instance, lack of information, but the main soul of information, which is the right to know of citizens, it is much more guaranteed whenever the system is distributed instead of being pyramidal, where there is a possibility to exchange, okay, and then citizens are the winners of all this. And as I say, when there is a significant clash or struggle for power behind many current phenomena, such as fake news. All right, so what is your opinion now? Well, I agree with Yolanda. The internet and the new technologies has allowed us to have many more journalists. Well, many people now have a blog or tweets, Twitter accounts where they are sending out information and becoming kind of journalists. That can be good because we have information at reach, but it can also be bad because that information is not always true. So therefore, it is extremely important that we are all aware, for instance, in terms of fake news, the importance of checking information. Not all the information that we get through WhatsApp groups or those typical messages that are around, it is, well, we should be very careful with them. We should not take them for granted. So it is true that traditional media and new media, okay. So well, there are also some techniques that are not benefiting from this. So clickbait is not of benefit of anyone. So you have big headline, very important or appealing headline, and then when you click on it, the news is big nonsense. This is not beneficial for the image or the reputation of journalism. So these things are to be looked at. And then, but I would like to go back as I started. The more information, the better. So I disagree with what Yolanda has mentioned, because the media is not a monopoly. Pharmacists are not a monopoly, and they open up pharmacies. Journalists, well, just deliver news through different channels, through different media outlets. Well, the problem today is that technology has triggered new channels to deliver that information. And so I would like to make a special emphasis on the following. And I believe that the hacking community will be glad to hear what I'm going to say. So all of you like credibility. Credibility comes from trust. Trust, you don't get it in a corner of the internet through a tweet. So I advocate for the coexistence of all media outlets. However, it looks like if the dark powers use technology channels to disrupt massive audiences without any kind of question. Carlos? Well, so anything that kind of disrupts us or disrupts this industry, I welcome it. So what has happened, and this is nothing new because everyone has said it, so there has been disintermediation when it comes to accessing information. Sometimes we try to differentiate between information and not purely informative content, but the channels have changed dramatically. Everyone agrees with that. For instance, Yahoo. So I remember a few years ago I went to a conference and the CEO of media outlets in Spain was boasting. He was delighted because 48% of the traffic to his media outlet came from Yahoo. 48%. So the younger we are, well, the journalists, the younger we are, the smarter we believe we are. Says, okay, well, the others are dinosaurs. No, they are no longer dinosaurs. So nowadays, older journalists are updated. But this man was boasting and saying that 48% of your traffic came from or Facebook. And I said, well, by the time Facebook will change the algorithm, you will be in trouble. And then there will come a time that you will have to pay to get those news. So Facebook, not even Facebook, but Twitter is an island that we are all very happy with to send to deliver information through. What I can see is that at the end of the day, Facebook or any other type of segmentation is just perfecting what is happening to all of us, including journalists, including myself. Sometimes we just want to consume, or we use it to support, to back up preconceived information. And this happens to all of us. So I am a journalist, and because I just don't want this type of things to happen, but this type of things happen. I'm not very much fond of re-educating the readership because I don't have the absolute truth. Well, the only thing that I can go outside to say to the reader, so have you seen this blog? Awake, we are living in a big lie. This is just rubbish. It's a huge rubbish. Again, I'm going to use extreme examples here. So, don't you think that these entries about Justin living as a reptilian? So it is one of my favorite conspirations. You know, I could read about it for hours and hours. But other type of information are not credible at all. But at the end of the day, even if I tell the reader, look, this has no credibility, well, they are going to tell me that I've been bought by Ibex company, that I get a phone call from Rajoy every morning. So I don't see the sense of it, I don't make any sense of it. And we are leading to a time where the trust to media outlets is what actually differentiates journalism. At the end of the day, what we have to do is just to sell our own brand. The media outlet has to sell its brand and to plant seeds so that people trust them, as well as journalists. But on the other hand, the money that we get for what we do, well, we all know what pays our salaries. clickbait, I invite you to log in to confidential.com. I very much advocate for a confidential, so I'd like you to go to the most read news. No, these are not the most read news. Well, in the ranking of most read news, you will never get the log news. This is what happens to us at the confidential with other sections. Well, clickbait have some room in my newspaper, or the article about how to practice oral sex, but if it helps pay my salaries and if it is done with some kind of rigor, it is kind of rubbish content. Yeah, but why do we have to offer wonderful content all the time? If you go to OK Diario, what they get most visits from is not from clickbait. Well, the advertising of OP Diaries is like really, really crazy. If you go to the Pirate Bay, I've been told that if you go to one of those download websites that continue to exist, if you click on that, well, the advertising that before took you to porn websites, now it takes you to OK Diario. In OK Diario, by using free tools, you can see what they get most money from. They get it from cooking recipes. So we have to find a balance there. So very interesting what you said about OK Diario, because yesterday I had to prove that to a colleague. I had to show to him that he was being redirected to OK Diario. Well, I don't know whether you know that 96% of the media outlets on the planet were controlled last year by 4 companies: Walt Disney, CBS, Viacom, 20th Century Fox, as well as Time Warner. So 20th Century Fox does not exist anymore, it's part of Disney. So therefore 96% is being controlled by 3 companies in the world. There are media outlets in Spain that are controlled by some of these major companies, through companies that have other companies, other investors that are present everywhere. They are, on the one hand, we have on the one hand dinosaurs at the issue paper magazine. Well, there are some national newspapers that they only issue like 50,000 copies every day, and then they said that the readership is 37,000. Many of these groups are being reconverting themselves. Witness is not only, Disney is not only about media outlet, but also cinema, new technologies that are using new technologies to continue having control over discourse. I think in Spain, Tele5 has kind of an online TV channel that is full of YouTubers, millennials. They have lots of followers. I guess that they are being paid to be on that channel and to appeal to attract new people. So those very same media are on Facebook, on Twitter, and they continue to use the same system that they've used in the past. That is to say, one-way media outlet. If you try to argue with El Diario, El Mundo, El País, or Digital Native, you get no response, no answer from them. The actual media outlets does not share their opinion. They just give out information in a one-way manner, and actually we are working nowadays a lot on so that information becomes reciprocal, and they are not interested in that. So as I mentioned the 96% of the media being controlled by 4 major players. Well, in Spain, only few groups control media outlets. For instance, Planeta Group, it owns La Sexta TV channel, looks like a left-oriented company, TV channel, and they also own La Razón, okay? La Razón, which is a reactionary on a newspaper, like right-winged oriented, and it is one of the newspapers that has the largest number of institutional advertising. So you can easily understand why. And we should not forget that all these groups have political or suffer political pressure. Is not only because they get calls from politicians when politicians do not like something that has been published about them, but they also own companies that in different industries, for instance, transportation companies, and they receive pressure and they say, okay, do not say anything negative about me on your TV channel, and then I will give you a license for your transportation company. Okay, so Luis has just arrived. Luis Núñez from Diario El Mundo. 1,000 apologies. As you know, we have freedom of speech, but not freedom of movements. When it rains in Madrid, it is just absolutely impossible for traffic to flow. So apologies. I've been working at El Mundo for 11 years now. I started off working at the video section, and there I did several reportages, and this is the way I met with Roman. It was an article about hacktivism. Now at this point in time I'm in the section about Madrid. I continue to be highly interested in this topic, and that's why I've been invited to be at this roundtable. I am the representative of one of the mainstream media outlets, which is both present online and offline. So Luis, to give you some background, some context, we have touched upon the first topic on the agenda, traditional versus digital media outlets. It's been said that technology is very positive. Luis has introduced the topic of seriousness, credibility. So Luis, correct me if I am wrong. You said that the traditional lines were more, let us say, credible than the digital ones. When we had the 9/11 attacks, I was in Morocco at the time. I was working, and I went to the office, and then the Moroccans looked at me, and they had like white faces. I haven't heard about what happened. I sat down, and the Moroccans told me, "Have you seen the news in your country?" I said, "No, what happened?" And then I took a look at international media press, and then I could see, well, the international media and the Moroccans told me that, said that that was an attack carried out by Al-Qaeda, and whereas in Spain they were saying something different. They were attributing it not to Al-Qaeda. Well, the case of September, oh no, it's not September the 11th, it's 11th March, a terrorist attack here in Spain. So in the case of attacks of 11th March, so there was a significant failure of communication due to a major mistake, which was to give credibility to the government source. So that's what happens to us journalists when we do not cannot use the primary source, so we don't have information from the primary source. We rely on the government source. And then El Mundo followed the first theory that the attack has been made by ETA terrorist group, which was not right. Once we had the visit of New York Times, and they told us about how they do things. She told us that the international sector is one of the sections that check whenever there is an international problem or event. So they just don't want to be mistaken by YouTube images. They are in charge of verifying or checking where do these images come from. So digital tools today are leading to fake news. So in this case, the fake news came from a government source. So we journalists often trust it. So my concern is the following. You have to look for credibility in the media outlets. And in theory, you have this institutional media supporting the information. So I saw that live. So what about credibility? credibility now on the side of traditional media outlets, or it is just about three major groups controlling everything in the world? So this is linked to the second point. Can we talk about freedom of speech, considering, okay, what pays for the salary of the journalist working for an outlet media, such we've seen in the movie The Dilemma? So okay, there are like nearly 2,000 participants to this conference, isn't it? Well, I believe that all the participants here can assure, okay, that the main headache is that there is no way to have to make true attribution. Yes, I fully agree with you. And I want to transfer the other problem which is felt by the hacking world. So nowadays attribution cannot be proved, and it will take some time before it is proved. Imagine all that in our industry, in journalism. We put our foot in it for sure, but we have to continue researching. Well, where does credibility come from? It's not about having an old or a new media outlet. So, well, there are many, many good professionals on both sides, and I just don't want to forget that our profession is always subject to be deceived. So I would like to add to what has just been said and to link it to this other point. So before we were talking about the changes that took place, but we were mentioning that from the viewpoint of having more actors delivering news. But the internet has not only changed that,
because now we can correct the information. It's not just being a blogger, about being a blogger or something in Twitter. Information from the media, from mainstream media, can be corrected. I remember an issue of a major newspaper in Spain with a photograph that was proved to be fake. It was people using Twitter that told the newspaper about it, and they had to withdraw it from the market. So it's not about replacing them. Now we have digital media like El Diario.es, small projects that are being financed with the money that comes from the subscribers. New media have revealed information about the Panama Canal, El Confidencial, La Sexta, and several others have a collaborative approach in place with peer reviews. So the changes introduced by the internet imply that alternative media can play a significant role. But what happens with credibility? Well, right now there is a lot of tension. I don't really know what direction to follow. We have the internet as the main reference, but because of the configuration of the internet itself, it seems that credibility might emerge from there. With a peer review approach, you publish something, and it will be the community that will confer credibility to whatever you say. You cannot just claim that you're a hacker. Your community must prove that you are indeed a hacker. We're not in a structure which is as distributed as it was before. There are non-transparent methodologies out there. There are algorithms we don't know anything about. So this theory, the intelligence of crowds, may make sense, but since the infrastructure is not distributed, it is not decentralized, those theories that say that credibility must be in the hands of everyone cannot be supported. So in theory, credibility should come from the community. El País has to withdraw an article. El Mundo has done similar things, and there's many other cases in the main television channel in Spain. So as I say, credibility must come from the community. The problem we have now is that the technology behind the scenes unfortunately is failing, because there are technological structures which are acting as a funnel for the information we get. We cannot really trust the system because it's no longer an ideal situation. Is there anything you would like to say about the free press? Well, there are certain hashtags in Twitter. Don't read them or don't vote for them. It is not just the interest of the advertisers. We've seen those first documents coming from WikiLeaks talking about the influence exercised by the American diplomatic corps, putting pressure on Spain on the usage of internet and on the sharing of files. It's not just the influence of advertisers, it's the influence from other stakeholders as well. Monica wanted to speak. Well, you mentioned the subject of credibility and freedom of speech. Well, as Carlos said, media must survive. They have their staff, they have their headcount, and they must pay their salaries. Be it a small or a large medium, they have to have the money to pay for those salaries.
Suscripción, usuarios y lectores que pagan por...
There are some media that are based on subscription fees, but they're very scarce. So advertisers are a key element, but that is not incompatible with credibility. For example, Roman, I could say, how many sponsors do you have for this event? A lot, more than I actually wanted. But luckily for us, we can organize events like this because there is a large number of partners, and we will not have a reason to doubt the credibility of the speakers. You need to have sponsors. You need to have the money to pay for quality contents. So there isn't a clash between credibility and a large number of sponsors. On the same note, there is something still current in the English-speaking world, which is fact-checkers. That's people who are in charge of making sure that journalists tell everyone where they got their information from. In the non-English speaking world, this figure has almost disappeared. There are fewer and fewer editors. You know that we are undergoing major changes, basically because of the crisis. But basically because we have so much uncertainty about the model we would like to see in place for our journalism. As Monica was stating, some of the most important newspapers, El Mundo, El País, ABC, are thinking of replicating models that are being used by other newspapers elsewhere. The thing is that people are not willing to pay for what they read. They want everything for free. So it's easier to fire journalists.
Una prensa libre autofinanciada por las personas que la leen. Eso es muy complicado, con lo cual...
It's complicated to strike the right balance. We need advertisers, and on the other hand, we should have a new business model so that people would pay for the news they read. Just to tell Luis, on the 11th of March, the attacks in Madrid, it is not just about the possibility of manipulating the news. There was manipulation from the government. That was terrible. The government said it was the Basque terrorist group, ETA. And there's something else. The 11th of March and ETA, the Basque terrorist group, had to do with the director with the director of that newspaper. It was not the newspaper itself. We know who insisted on blaming ETA for that terrorist attack. Having said that about freedom of speech, I'd like to go into that topic because I have an unusual profile. I'm a freelancer. I work for the media. I also work for companies. In El Confidencial, my profile is rather radical. Let me put it that way. In my weekly columns, we have some research. We also have information about the large companies in the stock exchange in Spain. We talk about those major companies. I have more legal cases open than I would like to have, but then we also have branded content. No one clicks on banners, so we have branded content. I particularly like it as long as you provide people with a clear view of the logo. So I see the two sides of the coin. My Director General told me one day, whatever we lose by paying for those legal cases, you recover with those branded content articles. So we more or less strike a balance between the two situations. So I see both sides of the coin. I see who sponsors what, and I see how much they invest. So in general terms, can media be free if they have sponsors? Of course they can. Things can get complicated if there is an influence on the editorial line. I don't think you can give an answer that describes the situation everywhere. I'm talking out of my own experience, of course. I've written for El Confidencial, mentioning advertisers, really major advertisers of the newspapers, and we got the green light. I once mentioned something about 20 closing down the social media in Spain. I haven't seen any advertisements from 20 in El Confidencial. Can we have free media despite the fact that they have partners or sponsors? Of course. El Diario explains this really well. Ignacio Escolar always brings full transparency to the P&L accounts. No sponsor on an individual basis contributes with more money than the full sum of all the individual subscribers. We have to live with that. That's the situation. At the end of the day, reputation is something you earn in the long run. I really liked your explanations. Luis, you wanted to say something else? Yes, very briefly. Two things. One, 2 days ago, a US citizen, a lady, resigned because she was telling lies. What I mean with that example is that when we talk about journalism, we can also talk about sports, like football. Saying that Real Madrid won the match, fine. Saying that a football player is committing a crime is also journalism. Those two types of journalism coexist. One is not too relevant. It is describing a situation, someone won a match, and that's it. Whilst the other is a very interesting initiative. As we have seen in the US, for more complicated situations, there is always the possibility that certain journalists be paid a certain amount in order to investigate on certain topics. So the practice of journalism with technologies, with influences, with thought leaders can be very diverse. For irrelevant things, there shouldn't be a problem. And for relevant things, in some cases,
mucho peso profesional y recursos. Las dos cosas son compatibles.
Y respondiendo muy rápido a lo que...
So let me give you a quick answer. If you pay someone in advance to carry out an investigation, that then becomes a legal case because someone wants to know about the source for the information that was gathered. Isn't that a bit twisted? Well, in theory, whoever is contributing with their money, they are donors, so they're free to go. They're free to do so. About the question whether we can have free press, I think your opinions are all very interesting, but I think it's very difficult. There are media like El Salto Diario, La Marea, El Diario.es, elplural.com, which are paid media. If you want to get information, you have to pay for it. And yes, you know that the newspaper is not influenced by a large advertiser, like El Corte Inglés, which is the #1 advertiser in Spain, 120 million euros last year in advertising alone. Easier said than done. And then each media has its own political approach, its own interests. I see quite a few problems. Because then you have pressure from the world of politics. And right now, it's propaganda at the top of the list. That's priority #1. Yes, we may establish a dialogue in social media, but if you take a look at hashtags moving at any one point in time, most of them originate in conventional media. These hashtags don't originate in social media themselves. They usually refer to things that have been exposed through different conventional media. For example, the Spanish television channel, there's no advertising. Well, there's this branded content for culture, but there isn't a clear interest as we can find in La Sexta, in Telecinco, and elsewhere. And this happens everywhere. The media I set up was a purely digital media that was 15 years ago, almost 16 years ago, back in 2002. And we were under pressure. We were a small media, and yet we had a lot of pressure from the mayors in the area, from the local councillors. It was unbelievable. I don't want to know about larger media. But then you realize that the Minister for the Interior meets the directors of the main newspapers, things that don't ever get published. And going back to the issue of propaganda, much of the information I see in the media has nothing to do with data. There's no data. There's news saying that Minister Cospedal, the Minister of Defense in Spain, said publicly that everything to do with the Catalan elections came from Russia. Any evidence? None. She was called from Lithuania. She was called by comedians, and she thought she was made to believe that these were important people calling her from the Lithuanian government, telling her that this had Russia behind the scenes. This was published everywhere. In the larger media, in the mainstream media.
Tendríamos que extender la mesa redonda.
We should extend the round table another 5 hours. There are so many interesting things. We may be outraged when reading something about hackers being evil. These are evil creatures. I got in touch with the media. I copied them in Twitter. I told them. And they didn't do basically anything. So should we have legal advisors in place or technical advisors in place telling us what to do? so that there is a rigorous approach in the media towards publishing certain types of information. My last question, the role to be played by journalists, I believe is essential. I have lots of chats with Carlos. I keep reading what he writes. Some of the things he publishes touches me directly. We're always sending messages to each other. You have a duty, you have an obligation as journalists. If you want this community with superpowers to collaborate, to help you, you have to be rigorous in your approach, rigorous in everything you do. This is a discussion I had with Luis. I told Luis that I was talking to him because someone had recommended that I got in touch with him. Your article was extremely rigorous. I really liked it. My question is, should you have technical advisors in place? Would you like to see members of this community collaborating with you so that they can give you advice, so you can get the necessary details and you can play that healthy role that in theory you should play?
Es verdad que, y sobre todo para hablar del caso particular, que es el que nos atañe y el que probablemente me trajo aquí.
This is probably the reason why I'm here. I started writing an article about hacktivism. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was just after the attack on Telefonica. Everyone was going nuts at that time, and I found it really interesting. So I decided to talk about hacktivism. Of course, I didn't know the hacking community as I know it now. And I know it much less than any of you in this room. So I did my best to talk to as many people as I could get hold of, so that I could derive my own conclusions and then put together a short summary, properly documented, for those that will read us. We cannot be experts in every single field, but we have a duty. We must go to the source, we must verify the consistency in the information, and then filter and summarize the information so that people can read it properly. Yolanda? Yes, I think that partnerships should be there at different levels. I've mentioned a number of people, and I've mentioned the concept of values. The media that are thriving are the ones that are transparent, like the case mentioned by Carlos, eldiario.es. Opening up your P&L account, being transparent, like El Confidencial. This is the database that I'm using for the information that I'm publishing. The data is publicly available. So the first partnership, well, take a look at The Guardian. The Guardian has realized that the community plays an essential role in everything they publish. So the media have been able to learn about different cultures outside themselves. And then we have the tools. There are tools that are being developed by the InfoSec community. Research journalism should use these tools. In the Panama Papers, there was a lot of technology behind the scenes. And I mean technology that is useful, and that is useful at any level, even for small investigations. So the use of technology, the use of technical tools for large or small projects is absolutely essential. And the third partnership is what you have just mentioned. And luckily for us, there is a pillar, freedom of information in our democratic regimes. Public institutions must be liable towards society. But then we have our legislation, we have the Transparency Act, which imposes a large number of limitations. In order to ensure that citizens have an actual right to access to know about that information transparently, I'm afraid we need additional elements in place, be it technology or people that ensure that the information is verified. There is a draft bill in progress before Parliament. We're asking for an extension of the protection for those hackers that have access to certain systems. In our criminal code, they might be liable to be sent to jail for a long time, and we want an extension of the freedom to inform about this. This is a fundamental right of citizens, and in order to ensure that that right is exercised, and may be exercised, we need that partnership at that level. Okay, fine, I take a good note of that. Next one, Jorge? Yes, please go ahead. What could I say? Yeah, of course. Journalists sometimes get into trouble, into amazing trouble. I know these two people next to me. Well, I know most of them. With Carlos and Luis, I've been collaborating for quite some time. With Luis, we had two cases. In one of them, we had a report on gender violence. I really love that article because it took us a few months to put together that article. That's the type of journalism that I love. Like, whatever Carlos does. Man, I have no idea about this. What can I do to find out? But this is beyond me. I have no knowledge about this. And then there is this lady that published this article on heinous beings. I think she lost the marbles altogether. I think she had no idea what she was talking about. There are laws in this country precisely to prevent what this lady was writing about. I mean, that title, heinous beings, people leaving their caves at night to eat babies alive. I mean, give me a break. Could newspapers have technical advisors on board? Well, that might be a good idea. It might be a good thing that they have advisors and consultants on board. But the important thing here is that journalism is based on exploiting data, on leveraging data. It's like fast food applied to journalism. Today, everything seems to be around who gets a scoop faster than everybody else, who publishes things before anybody else. We as users, we as consumers, should play an active role. We should put pressure on them so we can prevent this from happening, and rewarding those media that make an effort to verify the information through the sources. Some media use propaganda, which is usually called public relations. It's true. It's something that an Austrian journalist made up a few years ago. Public relations. If you take a look at what public relations is all about, this is propaganda, as understood by Goebbels. There's nothing in those two areas that allows you to determine that they're different from each other. I think you have to be rigorous. That's true. With a caveat. You have to be very rigorous, but let me give you an example. An example that relates to my own newspaper. A few months ago, Espejo publicó on Spanish TV a scoop from El Confidencial. The person that kidnapped Diana Kerr, I'm just going to make up the country, is in Lithuania. Why? Well, because they tracked an email that got to the family, sent from Diana Kerr's email address, and that email had been sent from Lithuania. All of you here can imagine what really happened, I'm sure, with that email. The thing is that El Confidencial has a section on technology with 5 people on board. If someone gets details telling the journalist that that email comes from Lithuania, they don't stop for a minute to think about the fact that, assuming that the person that kidnapped Diana Kerr has gone to Lithuania, they might have used a VPN network, so they probably simulated, they probably pretended to be somewhere else. I remember being at home, watching Antena 3, I remember there was a very well-known policewoman in the TV set sending them messages, telling them to be lenient on us. With that look that I was seeing, she was looking at her mobile phone. Yeah, look at my messages, look at my messages, be flexible. We are trying to fix this. All the entire technology team was there, saying it is impossible that the guy is in Lithuania. Of course you have to be rigorous. When you don't know something, investigate. There were 5 people in that team and lots of other people in the newspaper who knew about that. Yes, you need to be rigorous with one caveat. In my opinion, you mustn't write in favor of the sources or in favor of the industry you're talking about. If I write about hacking, I don't need to write for the hacking community. I need to write for my readers, and readers are everywhere, and not just a hacking community. If I work for a financial newspaper and I'm talking about financial institutions, of course, I will have a target audience which is much smaller. But I'm always thinking about the average reader, anyone. So I need to explain concepts which sometimes may be very complex. I must be down to earth in my explanations. And I must make their life easy. So whoever is really picky doesn't have a reason to complain. I've written a lot about startups, to give you an example. I used to write a lot about internet startups in Spain. My reputation is a bit worse now because I've written negative things about them.
But some online companies are scam, and as well as offline. So what happens when I talk about startups? You are all aware of the concept of raising a round of financing. When I do that, when I write about that, then the startup says, what about raising? Raising, it seems that you make it look very easy. It is like if we were just raising money. And you may go and say, yes, well, that's the only thing that you do. Okay, you are trying to raise money all the time. I didn't say it, okay? So, look, but I have to explain to my readers what's a round of financing about. And when I explain something else, well, the startups come to me and often they tell me this thing. Look, with this information that you have delivered, well, they complain about my information. Is it fake? Is it false? They said you are not helping out the industry. And I say, excuse me, what am I supposed to help the industry? I don't work for that industry or any source. I work for my readers. I work for my bosses and I owe myself to my readers. Yes, we have to be technically rigorous. But when we are all experts in something and someone from the outside talks about that something, so we try to be too picky and they say, well, we were not accurate enough when you use that terminology. I remember when in Salvados, they made an article or a documentary about startups. It was myself who said, oh, they have not been accurate enough. So this is a poor documentary. And I said, well, no, you shouldn't be like that. And I was actually failing on that as well, okay? So we have to be technically rigorous, but we should not expect, okay, the journalists to write what we just want to read about. Monica, yes, I fully agree with that. So both regarding the most technical side, or when we are talking about cybersecurity or IT security, the most technical side, hackers need journalists and vice versa. Because if we want to deliver content about that, well, some journalists are a bit more specialized into this field. In theory, I mean, not in practice. But we are interested on the topic, we read about it, we inform ourselves about it, but we should not expect all journalists to go through the same exercise. Some journalists are more specialized than others which are more mainstream. And as Carlos said before, if you have to write for the average reader, you have to speak or write with that average tone. You cannot be too specific or to write in a technical language, otherwise you will not be followed. So nowadays we have to take cybersecurity to more homes, to more people, and we just want to engage more readers, and we want readers to understand better what cyber security is about. And you, the experts, have to help us to communicate what hacking cybersecurity is about. Little by little, with the collaboration and the work of all of us, we will eliminating and getting rid of those type of negative articles that we mentioned before. So every day I get like 20 or 30 press releases from manufacturers in these sectors, and many of them, they continue to refer to hackers as if they were cyber criminals. If that press release gets to a non-specialized journalist, he will refer to hackers, okay? So because he doesn't know the difference. So I think that's an exercise that we all have to do together. It depends on your readers, your target. If your target is more technical, you have to be more technical as well as much more rigorous. But if the reader you are reaching out is not such an expert, you have to translate information for him to build a culture of cybersecurity, and that's what is most needed nowadays. So, Luis, 2 weeks ago, El País had a full page with the following headline: Theresa May accused the Russian government of launching WannaCry. On the article, at no time, the journalist said that that was an assumption, that has not been proven. So with this I mean the following. Number one, a journalist or a media outlet, if they come to a point where what they are writing about is a specialized topic, they need a specialist and expert to write about it. So it is demanded that society wants experts in every single media outlet to write about this type of expert or specialized news. So if they do not have those specialists on the staff, they should hire specialists to do that for them and to pay them. So can we still explain to the average citizen what happens? Instead of saying ransomware, well, we should talk about kidnapping. Everyone understands that. We all have to make an effort so that sophisticated, cool jargon is out of our articles and just to use plain and simple language. All right, so Luis, would you like to make a final comment? Well, I'm a bit out of the game. Yes, I fully agree with what has been just said by my colleagues. So drawing on what Luis said about having experts in mainstream media outlet, well, there is a quick answer to that demand. There is no money for it. It is really sad. It is really disappointing. I guess that this has happened to all of us. I've been working at El Mundo newspaper for 12 years now. So I've been working in 3 different sites. So the headcount has been reduced by 12%, and those of us who are still working for El Mundo, so every time we have to write a technical article, we will have to call our sources so that we can produce a technical article understood by everyone, and so that we don't look like scams when we have read. And Roman has asked me that question, has told me that some journalists in my company have done that, and that has been to the detriment of our reputation. So therefore, unfortunately, well, there are problems everywhere. There are good and bad journalists everywhere in every single media outlet you can think of. So, well, if you are well, if a bad journalist works in a mainstream media, it would be a bad journalist, and everywhere he goes to. So, would you like to say something, Jorge? Well, drawing on what they are saying about being documented before you write, we often face up another type of problem. So you find journalists that have been working on this for years. When we had the WannaCry issue, so on TV1 they had a debate, and then this man Oneto was there. He didn't know what he was talking about, and in the end, he ended up talking about the boss of the hat. Okay, oh, he was talking about, he said the boss of the hat, and he was talking about Chema. So I just wanted to say that here. And that's it. Okay, that's all from me. So any questions? Okay, there is a question over there. All right, hello, my name is Diego. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. It's very good to have different perspectives, different opinions. What you mentioned about sponsors of this conference, well, we all know that had not been for them, probably Rooted would not be possible, or probably we would not be here. So very clear. If I go to the website of Rooted, I don't know whether it has to do with the transparency of the organizer or demand of the sponsors. Click and I see who has paid, who is platinum, gold, or silver sponsor. So this is something that traditional media outlets are not used to doing. When I go to El Mundo websites, I just don't find that click the list of sponsors and the money they have contributed to, or the type of money they have contributed to. The same goes to, well, politicians, okay? They do not carry they do not wear a uniform with the logotypes of all the logos of all the companies that sponsor them. So we just want to know who is behind the scenes, who is paying. Okay, we take one more question, and then we will, one or two more questions, and then we will answer them all. Okay, so being clear about, or transparent about the payers. Well, I stood up because I'm short, no one has seen me. Okay, my name is Paula. I want to think that but I'm also related to journalism, and I'm very interested in this roundtable. So it's been mentioned building bridges between those working in cybersecurity and journalism. But you are working in media, important media outlets, and working in the field of journalism. What is the future for us, those who are being trained in cybersecurity as well as in journalism? Is there a niche for us? Okay, career in terms of cybersecurity and journalism. Any other question? Okay, hello, my name is David. I just want to change topics slightly and to ask you about the reflection on the press about security breaches. If the company is a Spanish company, that doesn't show in the news. And then second, whenever there is a piece of news out there, so the blue hat professionals, it's either because we are just clumsy, we just did not put up the parts timely, or it is just because it happens to everywhere and we just don't need to be hired because our work is just useless. Okay, so who'd like to start? Yolanda, please. I will be very brief. So about the future. So if you notice the job offers of media outlets, they request technical profiles. Nowadays, media outlets want to recruit technical profiles for development of tools for research journalism and for cybersecurity. There is a profile which is, well, it is used at New York Times, another, which is the cybersecurity advisor. More and more media use documents that may jeopardize the media outlet. So the media outlet wants to ensure the source or reliability of the source, and they just want to use tools ensuring the reliability of the sources. So more and more media outlets will be recruiting technical profiles, both for development of tools and to ensure security of digital communication. In terms of the lack of rigor of journalists, and in case of technical breaches, what I would like to say is clarify something that was not made clear before. There are two elements here that may suffer from this lack of rigor. Well, an obvious one, everything is badly told in a fake manner, with lots of technical errors and with no rigor whatsoever. This is what we've seen up until now. But that can be fixed by giving a didactic explanation about it. But if the journalist is not aware of many dynamics or vested interested or economic interest or failure, sometimes security breaches can be explained through financial interest. Well, some updates, some releases cannot be done, for instance, of industrial systems because they could not be controlled remotely or because they would be very costly. So there are some cybersecurity issues that the journalist will not focus on or will not research on or will not take careful enough, will not be careful enough about it in terms of how the company handled that security event. So sometimes the problem comes not only because the journalist is not rigorous, because he's not well aware of the questions he has to ask. Yes, I agree with you that security events sometimes are not properly covered, but there are many reasons or some reasons explaining that, and of course at the end of the day the ones that lose the most are the readers, the citizens. Okay, so Luis, please. Well, a quick comment. Well, we all remember WannaCry. So crisis management was not well performed because the spokesperson was, or the spokespeople were not timely ready. It sounded like biased, it was taken as biased, and it was misleading, answering what has been said. Yes, technical profiles or experts with ability to manage crisis are required. So this morning I attended an event of INCIBE, and they shared a statistic. Well, 250,000 incidents and cyber attacks. If a journalist does not cannot differentiate cybercrime from cyber attack, or a journalist that says that a cyber attack is the same as an incident, this is misleading. Of course, we will have to try to say things or to tell things better, and I have to say that it is lots of work is yet to be done. So regarding David, so there is a regulation out there to regulate that. That is to say that those companies that have used to be silent and not admitting that they didn't do things right, they will no longer be able to do that. But now they will be requested to say aloud, sorry, I made a mistake, and I have to tell you as a user that I didn't know how to, I was not a good custodian of your data. So this new regulation will be very favorable to us. Surely there will be bigger budgets, the tasks that you do will be better acknowledged, will be better recognized. So there have been some recent cases, and I have to say that aloud, which was one of the incidents of one of the subsidiaries of Santander Bank. They did a very good communication saying that they had been subject of an attack. Oh yes, the director of communication shared that with us. Shared that. Okay, so 7 minutes before we finish. So I'd like to say that that regulation that is ahead of us has to be transposed to the Spanish legislation. It is very easy to say that a US company has had all data stolen and the ID numbers of the customers are published on the internet. That is very easy. But when we are talking about a Spanish company who is an advertiser in your newspaper that you need to make a profit to keep going, I understand it. Well, we know what happened to La Sexta with El Pozo. They published this thing about the mutant pigs. So El Pozo did two things. So it says, I made a mistake, okay, I'm going to fix it. And then also another measure taken by El Pozo company was the following, okay, no more advertising to La Sexta TV. Well, let us see what happens by the time the regulation will be transposed to the Spanish legal system. Probably, well, we will have to publish like a really, well, this type of news will be published in a small letter. Okay, so, well, transparency about sponsors, about funders, it would be very interesting to carry out that transparency exercise. I'm not a big media outlet, I don't get any funding, not for the time being, but by the time I would have sponsors, I would say, okay, this is the transparency portal where you can go and see all the sponsors, all the advertisers. Okay, next year, okay, we will also publish transparency. Okay, so the GDPR has been mentioned. Well, hopefully will bring about a change. We expect it to bring a change. And this is, well, these two things are very much related to each other. Communication. It will be mandatory to communicate any incident that has an impact on the users of the company that has been subject of a security breach. Therefore, we will need communicators and companies with skills to communicate of that. Companies, when they have crisis, in cases of cybersecurity crisis, you have to be well skilled and ready and trained to tell that, to publish that, and to do that rigorously. So regarding sponsors behind big companies and transparency about it, it would be very interesting exercise. Why not doing it? I don't know how much the volume of advertisers that we have. I guess that the volume of advertiser is big enough to have that portal of transparency, but I would agree with having it. So this will also help the following. Sometimes companies do not publish things not because of any hidden reason, but just because we just didn't get that piece of news from that specific company. There is no hidden reason or dark reason. And as Jorge mentioned before, often media outlets, it's not that they just don't want to publish things because they are being financed by it, but because the opacity of companies do not enable them to publish that. Well, in the case of WannaCry, I'm not saying that Jorge is partially true, but I'm saying that sometimes the opacity of those larger companies and the lack of transparency that they have in the communication department makes it difficult for us to publish what happened. And to answer the second question that was asked here, I wish you will have lots and lots of opportunities. I wish that media outlets will come to a point where the finance of the advertiser and others would require technical profiles such as yours that would take us to excellent traditional media. Just don't want to be opaque, but we sometimes we just don't have the enough resources to reach the level of excellence that everyone would like to have. So Carlos, well, in terms of finance, it would be a cool interest or exercise of transparency. I'm going to play the devil's advocate. I don't see it is feasible at all. Comparison with Rooted is far from being ideal. So I'm going to go to the most transparent media outlets I'm aware of, which is the Diario and Contexto. They publish the money they get from advertisers. Well, you may go and say, well, you can tell me how much you get from each. Well, so there is a reason that comes to mind. You don't disclose your prices because you don't want your competitors to know about that. So imagine that Rooted is not a conference but a training school. And imagine that this very same weekend it would compete with other events. I'm not saying that they should not be transparent, but perhaps it would not give us such a great level of detail. How can you measure the amount of sponsoring that companies do? Well, you can see that through banners, branded content. I do branded content. At the end of the day, we are hired by the same companies. When I get a press release to make a big article for branded content, I just insert a paragraph of what they have sent me in Google just to see whether everyone has quoted the source. But some media do not do it, do not quote the source. So I just don't quite agree with what you said about, Spanish companies not publishing when they are subject of a security breach. Well, Telefónica talks about that, but it was the other companies that were fast enough not to have their names on the screen that was shown with the list of companies impacted on TV3. So Telefónica invests lots of money in media outlets. I guess that El Corte Inglés, they are bigger advertisers, but I could tell you wonders about Telefónica. So one of the communications directors at Telefónica, I'm sure he was really crazy, and I say, all these people, okay, I always dominate them, but today I am full of shit and I cannot really, I don't have any control over them. So this type of companies, well, they speak about themselves, they publish things about themselves. And as regarding Paula's question, I think the future is bright future. So I will kind of spoil my next presentation, okay? Clickbait. It is, a journalist who gave a talk, and then, you will be surprised about what happens next. Well, that type of specialization is very cool. In the Confidencial, for a long time, the best rated journalists were the data analysts. So that's the spoiler of my presentation. There is a big potential there for two reasons. First, journalists dealing with technology issues, broadly speaking, so we don't often do research. When you go to a media outlet, the view of journalists in technology are those who do reviews, they talk about cybersecurity in a very generic manner, but we do not make any research, and this comes into place with the second element. Okay, senior traditional journalists know nothing about technology, so therefore they will never ever use that technology to make any research. So therefore we have kind of like a wonderful tunnel in between, and I assure you that I take advantage of it, which is wonderful to research and to raise topic, both, depending, even if you are on the journalist side or on the technical side. So Panama Papers, all the large researches of the past few years have been made thanks to the collaboration of the hacking world. So there is a great, significant, wonderful opportunity for collaboration there. So Yolanda, I would just like to introduce a nuance. So here we have the regulation for data protection. It will come into force, obliging publication of data when users have been impacted, and then regulation for the network. If a company is responsible of a critical infrastructure company has been compromised, have been breached, have been a victim of this attack, will have to be published. This is being negotiated, and then big companies are making lobbies so that there is transparency, but just enough transparency. So there will be a different way of communicating this type of information. The one that enforces the regulation, and the other one for the critical infrastructure companies. Okay, let us see what happens in the end. I just wanted to introduce that nuance. In terms of sponsoring and finance, I just didn't answer on that point because I have made a mention to that before. Okay, so a very last comment or opinion from all of you.
We can start with Jorge.
Yolanda.
Sí, yo creo que colaborar y
Collaborating, yes, absolutely, and respecting. As my colleague said, reliability, reliable sources for us as journalists. We want to get properly informed, and you as experts could help us and not being on the defensive, because together we could bring about really interesting things, trust and confidence. Journalists delivered the speech on journalists and hackers, and what happened after that I wouldn't like to mention. Monica, I'm going to stay to listen to your presentation. Apart from collaborating, talking to each other, understanding each other, we're not enemies, we're friends. I would say that all of us must make an effort on both sides to be more precise, more accurate, using a language which is understood by both sides. Very well, thank you so much to all of you. So you have two options. We may have Carlos's presentation right now and off you go, or would you prefer to go for the break now? Those of you wanting the presentation right now, those of you who want to have a break, no, we have the presentation right now.
Gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Venid un segundo que...
Thank you so much, and bear with me for a second.